everyone. Hannah here with Social 101 over Wintermester. So this is week 3, lecture 1, so your 5th video. And today I'm going to be talking about chapters 10 and 11 from your textbook. So we're almost there. I'm going to start with lecture and then I'll send out the exit paths. You can also see that link on the slides, followed by reminders. All right, chapter 10, consumer culture and the social self. Well, what's the self? We all sort of have a lay understanding of what that means, but how do we understand this term from a sociological perspective? The self is our understanding of how we think and feel we are as individuals, how we're distinct from other people in our society. Now, there's a lot of more contemporary sociological theories that sort of analyze how we make sense of our individual self based off of our place within society. Now, recall from way back during week 1 when we studied foundational sociological theories, Marx, Weber, and Durkheim, we learned about symbolic interactionism. So your textbook authors reintroduced this theoretical concept in chapter 10. And so looking at how the social world is created through everyday relationships and interactions, and how we construct meanings and our sense of self, our various identities through interactions with others. So if you think about the field of psychology, which is another social science, those folks are particularly interested in the individual and in the psyche, the brain, the mind, right? In sociology, we're more interested in society, right? And how groups of people are working together. But we do care about individuals as well. We're just more concerned with how individuals interact with the greater population and within society, and what that means for how we understand our individualness, rather than what it means to be an individual and how individuals think. Now, the first sociological concept related to self that your textbook authors introduce us to is Cooley's looking glass self. He argues that our sense of self is always relational. It develops through imagining how others perceive and evaluate us. Now, one thing that's important to note here about the looking glass self is it's not actually about how other people understand us, it's how we think other people understand us. So it still has to do with our individual perceptions and what we as individuals are thinking, but it's going one step further and saying, okay, well, what do we think other people think about us, okay? Now, we also have Mead's work on I and me. The I is the impulsive part of a self. So these are the basic things that we like and we want. The me is sort of the other side of that coin. It's the socialized self. And so if you recall from last week, we learned about processes of socialization. So the me, our sense of identity is of who me is based off of socialization processes. And then we've talked a little bit about identity, especially covering the term intersectionality, which we'll review again, I believe, later this week. But identity is a sociological concept that refers to different aspects of ourself. Our identities relate to social structures and our roles. So, depending on context, you might feel a strong sense of identity as a student. But if you're not on campus, maybe you're back home visiting family for the holidays, that's going to sort of go into the periphery, and you're around your family, you're going to be your main identity is going to be family member, son, daughter, brother, sister. And then similarly, if you have a job in Conway, maybe you work at one of the restaurants in the tourist industry in Myrtle Beach, for example, when you're there, you're thinking more as an employee. And sometimes these various identities conflict, right? When your boss asks you to work an extra shift and you have class, he probably doesn't care that you have class, right? Because when you're at work, your identity is only employee. When you're on campus, your identity is pretty much only student, or at least I hope it is. All right. And then as we develop these various identities, we have to manage stigma. Stigma is a deeply devaluating attribute. It sort of spoils an identity. So this is something where if you're viewed as different or undesirable based off of one of your identities, you're going to experience stigma. And Goffman argues that part of the process of developing identities is that you have to learn how to manage stigma based off of the identities you have and how you operate within a society. And then finally, we end with Goffman's work on total institutions. Now, up until this point, we've talked about social institutions. Remember, we gave examples of how things like family, religion, education, politics, these are all social institutions in that they organize our everyday lives, and they also provide structure to how we organize our society. Now, total institutions are regular social institutions, but they're places where people are cut off from the rest of the society for a prolonged period. So, sort of the classic example in Goffman's work is a psychiatric ward or a prison or the military. Those are sort of classic examples of total institutions. However, as someone who researches subcultures on college campuses, I would argue that universities are also total institutions. And I think that's probably the easiest example for you all as college students to grasp. Think about how when you are a student on a residential college campus like CCU, you're cut off from a lot of other aspects of society in that you live on campus. Your daily schedule is organized based off of the classes that you schedule, and you only can schedule classes at certain places during certain times based off of what the university and university administration deems appropriate. You have to eat at certain places on campus at certain times, and you can only eat the food that CCU serves, right? Unless maybe you have access to a car and you leave campus sometimes. But even then, you don't have that much agency, right? Because you're still limited to the restaurants and areas close to campus. And so we can start to think about how CCU and other universities where the majority of students live on campus are total institutions in that their everyday lives are totally controlled by their university, right? All right. Chapter 11. And of course, as always, there are other key terms and theories from both chapters 10 and 11 in your textbook that you need to know for your final exam. I'm simply going over some of the big overarching concepts, showing you how to define things, how to elaborate on the concepts from our book based off of real world examples in your own words. And then also thinking about how we can apply theory and some of those overarching themes to examples and to key terms that we have. All right, so chapter 11, ideology, intersectionality in the beauty industry. Remember, I said we would cover intersectionality later this week, and lo and behold, it's in chapter 11. Now, the textbook authors start off on chapter 11 talking about body work. So this sort of connects chapter 10 and chapter 11 in that body work is work done by the self, or you can hire people to help you, to manipulate and manage the body to conform to cultural norms. And so this relates to identity and our sense of self because the way that we want to present ourselves, the way we want to manipulate and manage our body based off of beauty standards, in large part has to do with our identity categories. So it has to do with race, class, and gender, right? And of course, that relates to intersectionality. Okay, and so we can think of the role of ideology and intersectionality. Now, I already talked a little bit about the role of intersectionality, but let's refresh what ideology means. So, ideology is a set of beliefs that individuals, but oftentimes individuals within a society, all sort of share. And so, members of a society tend to have the same ideas and ideology. And so, this differentiates what is sort of good and mainstream ideas in our world and in our society, and sort of what is not good or normal in our society. And so the way that we understand beauty and what's deemed beautiful in our society is based off of our ideological beliefs. So people within the same society sort of all have a basic agreement on what beauty means, okay? And then that in turn influences the beauty industry and what people buy, right? And those two things go hand in hand, where they're both like we want to be beautiful in a particular way, so we buy products that are a part of the beauty industry, but then in turn, the beauty industry influences how we want to look and how we sort of see ourselves as individuals within a society. And so that sort of answers that next question. How does ideology influence beauty standards? Now, in the United States, we all know, of course, that beauty in our world, in our society, means being, we often associate it with being feminine, so being female, thin, young, white, made up. So using a lot of makeup and a lot of beauty products, right? And that's true of most Western societies. And again, this is about ideology. We all in our society sort of have this basic understanding of what beauty means. It's ideological. When we think of, if everyone closed their eyes and we were asked, how do you understand the term beauty? We'd all probably generate a similar image that has to do with being young and thin and white. And again, thinking about intersectionality, which of course is a reviewed term. We have multiple aspects of identity and social location within our society based off of identity categories such as race, class, and gender. And we also know that these aspects of identity lead to systems of inequality that intersect to shape social advantages and disadvantages. And so, of course, this is systemic and that these things influence social institutions. So, family, religion, education, politics, all those things that I talked about earlier at the beginning of this video. All right, so you can start to see how the textbook authors weave in earlier theories and concepts, content from the chapter on race and doing gender, into this next chapter on on the beauty industry. All right, so the beauty industry is really essentially the only new term we're learning in this chapter because we've already discussed ideology and intersectionality. All right, so that's it. Make sure you're thoroughly looking over all the key terms and theories from chapters 10 and 11. Here's your exit pass link. You can access it by typing it, just reading it and typing it. You can copy and paste it from the slides. And I will also send a class-wide email with this link. Don't forget, chapter review 5 and discussion post 5 are due Monday, January 1st at 11:59 p.m. You should be finishing up chapters 10 and 11 if you haven't already, and then finish the last 2 chapters of your textbook, so 12 and 13. As far as upcoming attractions, you have chapter review 6 and discussion post 6 due Wednesday, January 3rd at 11:59 p.m., and your final exam, so exam 2, is due Thursday, January 4th at 11:59 p.m. And so for the exam, I hope now that you've taken the first exam, you understand the basic logistics. It will be the same. It'll open at least 24 hours before the deadline. It will be an hour and a half, multiple choice, true, false. I did not do any short responses on the exam 1. I don't know if I will on exam 2, but be on the lookout for that. And of course, the study guide will be posted on Moodle. Other than that, happy studying, good luck, and enjoy the new year. I will talk to you all soon. Bye, everyone.